Chamber with us. It's been a long 2 years. Welcome to the regular Bellevue City Council meeting for April 18th, 2022. City Clerk, could you please, well, before we start, we have 3 excused absences tonight. You may notice that there's not as many people sitting before you as typically. So we would like to excuse Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse, Councilmember Stokes, and Councilmember Lee. Do I have a motion to excuse those absences?
I move to excuse those 3 absences.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. City Clerk, would you like to call roll?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Robinson.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse. Councilmember Barksdale.
Here.
Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Robertson.
I'm here.
Councilmember Stokes. And Councilmember Zahn.
Here.
Councilmember Zahn, would you like to lead us in the flag salute?
Yes, Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we'll start with oral communications. City Clerk, would you like to introduce?
Mayor, we do have a proclamation this evening.
Sorry. Yes, we do. Councilmember Robertson, would you please read the Arbor Day Proclamation?
Certainly, I'd be happy to. Whereas April 22nd, 2022 is the 52nd Earth Day, marking the birth of the modern environmental movement in 1970. And whereas April 29th, 2022 is the 150th Arbor Day, celebrating the value of trees. And whereas Bellevue is known and celebrated as a city in a park and has worked for decades to steward the environment. And whereas Bellevue has established ambitious goals related to climate change, energy, mobility and land use, waste, and natural systems in the Sustainable Bellevue Environmental Stewardship Plan. And whereas community participation is an essential aspect of achieving Bellevue's environmental goals, and Earth Day is an opportunity for people in the community to learn, volunteer, and get engaged. And whereas Bellevue for the 31st consecutive year has been recognized as a Tree City USA community by the National Arbor Day Foundation and is dedicated to maintaining its tree planting practices. And whereas trees are an integral part of the fish, wildlife, and people in Bellevue. And whereas on Earth Day, Bellevue will launch a new Sustainable Bellevue Climate Challenge with actions to reduce environmental impacts and opportunities to get involved and make a difference. And whereas people who live and work in Bellevue can go to www.bellevueclimatechallenge.org to sign up and participate in a friendly competition to take steps to reduce energy use at home, green your commute, and learn about other actions to reduce your environmental impact. Now, therefore, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, and on behalf of its City Council, do hereby proclaim April 22nd, 2022 as Earth Day, Arbor Day in Bellevue, and encourage all residents to take part in protecting our trees and natural environments and join the city in a commitment to reducing our environmental impact as a community. Signed, Lynn Robinson.
Thank you. City Clerk, do you have people signed up for oral communications?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This evening there are 11 total speakers, and I will remind folks that oral communications is allotted a 30-minute time period at the council meeting, and the number of speakers is limited to 3 speakers per topic in support or in opposition. And it does appear that we will reach that three-person rule at some point this evening. And with that, I will call the first speaker, which is John Belay, who I believe is participating remotely. Mr. Belay, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
All right, I assume you can hear me. So I want to talk about trees for a moment. I know that the policy is going to be thought about in the future. I sent an email to the council members concerning these points, but I wanted to reiterate, and then I'll come back in person. I'm unable to be there in person right now, so I got to go remotely. First thing about climate change. I'd like to, I'd like the council to consider solar panels. I live over in Lake Hills and I cannot put solar panels up because I have tall trees to the south of me. I'd like, if you consider how much carbon solar panels could take off the grid compared to one tree, there's really no comparison. It's 3,000 pounds per year, more than a ton and a half, and one tree is in the pounds. So I think the policy that the council comes up with should address folks who want to put solar panels and then the trees that are providing the shade and that sort of thing. So maybe shorter trees, deciduous trees, something like that. Certainly not against trees. The next thing is just the continuity of electricity. Over here in Lake Hills, when we get a little bit of wind, the power goes out. I think we need to think about where the trees are located in reference to the power lines. We're heavily dependent upon electricity now, so that's something there. Save our scale. That's something there with, that's a movement to limit building in our area here over in Lake Hills. On that, I really don't think that the tree policy should be driving or should be used as some sort of a impediment to limit the building. I think those things should be separated. And I think if you use the tree policy to limit building, there are going to be other things that come out of that that we don't want, like increasing housing costs. Fourth is looking at our neighboring communities and their tree policies. I don't think that Bellevue should take our cues from our neighboring, from Kirkland or Issaquah or anywhere. I think we should be leading in looking down the road 50 to 100 years and get a tree policy that is a global and encompassing what we need to do to move forward in a super clean environment using solar and living with the trees in harmony. So I hope that you consider those things. I'll be back in person when I can be to reiterate this, and I thank Councilmember Neuenhaus for answering my email. And I have a jar of plum jam from a tree in my yard for him. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Belay. The second speaker on the list is David Peterson, who I believe is also participating virtually. Mr. Peterson, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. Your time begins now.
Okay, council members, mayor, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My name is David Peterson, and I'm an unvaccinated driver operator who is currently on an unpaid leave status with my employer, Snohomish Regional Fire and Rescue, located in Snohomish County. On October 21st, 2021, I received a letter from my fire chief, Kevin O'Brien, indicating my belief in God and a decision to remain unvaccinated made me a threat to myself, my coworkers, and the community I serve. Last Thursday, during an open fire commissioners meeting, our fire chief decided he wants us back. And he is going to meet with our union and bargain a way back that is safe and effective. And I wanted to call on this council and the mayor to look to our fire chief for answers. You have brave men and women who are currently serving for the city of Bellevue, and they are in the exact same position as I am. This opportunity is great for the city of Bellevue, and the city of Bellevue can be the first in King County to welcome their unvaccinated firefighters back by accommodating them. I just wanted to also say that there is a way back, and it's being done all over the state. These brave firefighters are dedicated and loyal public servants. Our job as a firefighter is to remain neutral politically. It doesn't matter where we stand. We get a call, we show up, we do our job, we provide the best customer service we can, and we hopefully impact that citizen. I believe the citizens are fed up with the overreach and political agendas. Look around at what's even happened today. Masks are gone on airplanes and public transportation. The health district from the state denied the COVID vaccine in schools, and you no longer need to show your papers to eat at a restaurant. If this council decides to terminate these brave firefighters, I believe your political careers will be over. You will not be reelected, and I believe lawsuits will come. I'm calling on this council and the mayor to make the right decision. Stand up for your brave firefighters because they stand up for you on a daily basis. Please show King County who the real leaders are. I believe the city of Bellevue can be the first in King County to do this because I have seen nothing but a bunch of followers in this state. Thank you so much for your time. I yield the rest.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. The third speaker on the list is Aaron Keller. Oh, Mr. Keller is here with us in person.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. My name is Aaron Keller. 10 years ago, I thought I won the lottery. I was hired as a firefighter for the city of Bellevue. On December 29th, I requested a religious exemption from the COVID-19 vaccination requirement placed by Governor Inslee. By all accounts, the exemption was approved. However, an accommodation would not be granted because, quote, employees who are not fully vaccinated against COVID-19 will not be permitted to provide direct patient care at this time because they present a heightened risk of transmitting the virus, compromising the city's ability to provide safe and effective services, end quote. A heightened risk is speculative. I have a heightened risk of skydiving. I have a heightened risk of skiing double black diamonds. I have a heightened risk of driving at 70 miles an hour on the freeway. I could go on and on. Just because it's a heightened risk doesn't mean something will happen. Speaking of transmitting the virus, on December 16th, this Deputy Chief Adelson sent an email to all fire personnel, quote, being fully vaccinated does not give you 100% immunity. It does lower your chance of infection or not getting as ill as if you were infected. Likewise, it does not eliminate your ability to spread the virus, end quote. Our own admin admits this virus is spread to the community, regardless of vaccination status. Aren't they just as much of a heightened risk? There are members of this department that tested positive the day after working a scheduled shift. Were they not a heightened risk to the community while they were on duty? This is no longer about science and health. For 2 years, we have heard repeatedly, the science says, and we are following the science. Yet 1 week ago, Governor Inslee was asked about dropping emergency powers. He stated, quote, as we've said for 2 years now, we'll continue to keep people safe. We're doing that, and we want to make sure that federal money keeps coming in. So it's important to keep this in place right now, end quote. We are reducing this pandemic to employees down to dollar signs, not science and health. One of the core values of the city of Bellevue is commitment to employees. If you are truly following the governor's commands, you might as well say commitment to dollar signs, because that's all this means. Either that or drop the commitment, because that's all you have are employees. I was told I would cost the city too much money in testing, PPE, etc. Since I left, overtime costs are astronomical, and Deputy Chief Adelson stated in a December 18th email, quote, we are relying more and more on huge amounts of both voluntary and mandatory overtime. This has a huge impact on the health and welfare of all of our members, end quote. Morale is down, many firefighters are overworked. This can and will have serious impacts on the community. I ask you to look at the overtime costs alone. Since I left, there is also a high cost of testing every member every day, which continues to this day. How would I be a higher cost to the city than what is happening each day? All I want is to be given the same opportunity to test and have the ability to continue the job I love and what you've spent thousands of taxpayer dollars on me for training. I ask you, who made this decision and why? What is the undue hardship? Please make this department whole again by bringing us back. The city and the community deserve to know these answers, as do I. Thank you.
The next speaker on the list is Haley Keller.
Hello, my name is Haley and I am 14 years old. The last time my dad worked as a Bellevue firefighter was October 18th, 2021, 6 months ago. Since then, he has had no income, no benefits, and no work. Furthermore, he is unable to get another job that can support his family of 7. Why? Because the city has stubbornly refused to give my dad accommodation for a vaccine he believes is against his biblical, Christian, and moral beliefs. The city of Bellevue's decision to refuse my dad accommodation is unnecessary and illegal. Bellevue unnecessarily refused my dad an accommodation for his personal and sincerely held religious beliefs. According to the FDA and the CDC, the COVID vaccine does not stop transmission of COVID-19. However, according to the city's own statements, the transmission of COVID-19 is precisely the reason they forced my dad out of a job in the first place, because he is somehow a risk. Also, the FDA and CDC have released statements saying the vaccine only protects yourself and not other people. Thus, saying my dad needs to get the vaccine to protect the public is both not scientific and not true. The city has refused my dad accommodation unnecessarily, and has resulted in 6 months of incomeless living. The city of Bellevue illegally refused my dad accommodation. The First Amendment of the Constitution states that there should be no law prohibiting the free exercise of religion, yet the city has done just that. A valuable and experienced first responder, the city of Bellevue kicked my dad out of a job because he sincerely believed something contrary to their command. Even worse, all the firefighters giving patient care who applied for religious exemptions had their accommodations turned down. That is unacceptable religious discrimination. Discrimination of any kind is illegal and punishable according to Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Although the city claims these are unprecedented times and times of crisis, it is still illegal to infringe on the religious freedoms of the people. Because of an illegal mandate, my dad was forced on unpaid leave. Additionally, the city is forcing people to receive a medical procedure without their informed consent or lose their jobs. According to the Nuremberg Code, this is absolutely prohibited. The individuals must have the ability to exercise their free right of choice without any ulterior form of constraint or coercion. The individual must also know the hazards reasonably expected in all effects on his health and body. The city has not given this informed consent to the people, and that is totally and unquestionably unlawful. The city claims this is for the safety of the public community. That is illogical. Because the city refused accommodation to my dad and other firefighters, there's a shortage of experienced firefighters on the job. This is a danger to the community who rely on firefighters to save their lives every day. My dad is no longer working as a Bellevue firefighter because of the city of Bellevue's unnecessary and illegal decision to refuse my dad accommodation. The city's resolve to remove my dad from the workplace has detrimentally affected our family. This is not just about masks. This is not just about mandates. This is not even just about vaccines. This is about freedom, freedom of choice, freedom of religion, and freedom to work. Concerning all this, I urge you, let my dad work again, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keller. That was our third speaker on vaccine mandate. The next speaker is Marguerite Richard.
Hello, is this on?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so used to having a big microphone and blasting it with my voice, but you know, I'm just really grateful for being here tonight because I've heard COVID mentioned. Oh, see, now I can hear myself. Do I need to start all over again?
No, we heard you.
Okay, anyway. Because of the nature of COVID, I'm not going to speak directly to that, but I'm a blessing because I don't have it. I know other people that got it. But the worst COVID that has ever hit us is City Hall in Seattle and the current mayor, Bruce Harrell. I have to say it because we're going to be held accountable for everything that we say in the land of the living. So I said it because of the fact that he has abused me. He has abused his authority as far as the Americans with Disability Act, Section 504. And the reason why I'm triggering this, because he was with the council for 10 years, and I kept telling him over and over again that elder abuse was on the rise in the city, and they were using me as an example. And I couldn't understand. I said, well, what's wrong with me? Why would you do such a thing to me? And I'm just wanting to be human just like everybody else. And I was sitting there holding back the tears, just listening to the situation with these firefighters and losing their job over something that people said in the Constitution that we have a right to free speech. So they probably said, okay, I don't want to do that. and then you harm them. And that's the same thing what they're doing with the indigenous black community. They put Jim Crow signs up in City Hall saying that Black Lives Matter, no questions. I have a lot of questions. I'm gonna keep on asking them until the day that I die. Then in Seattle Municipal Tower, they have the same sign and they put it on our streets. That's the same thing they did in Jim Crow. They separated us. So if a child comes in that hall and sees it, they're saying, Mommy, I'm not black. So now what? What does it mean for me? We don't need to be divided like that. We don't need to keep people in our business. Get out of our business and let us live a free life. That's why I put justice. Justice for all means just that. Stop putting all this inequality stuff in our face and get a move on it. I recently signed up to speak in the Washington State Human Rights Commission. I'm looking for where it was in queue for me to speak. They went into executive session, came back from executive session, and never called on me for my 2 little lousy minutes to speak. I'm still trying to figure out, and discrimination is illegal in this country, and I have to come to all these city council meetings. For real, for real.
I so appreciate everybody's enthusiasm for what's being said, but we don't typically ask for people to applaud. So if you want to wave your hands in approval, that would be great. Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Richard. The next speaker on the list is Honorable Michael Fuller.
Yes, I'm Honorable Michael Fuller, sui juris, Private Attorney General, juris de juris. Now, I have a problem with Bruce Harrell, the mayor of Seattle, in breach of contract, breach of trust for fraud, intent, and fraudulent dishonest act, openly violating his oath of office. He's not above the law. And because he's in breach of contract, that becomes a conflict. Mayor, you know about the conflict. When it's a conflict in state constitution and statute, state must yield the federal constitution and statute of the United States versus First Bank, September 27, 1983, and Bivens versus Six Unknown Agent, 1981. Now, I have a problem with Bruce Harrell making the statement, agents need a chance. At the time of September 11, 2001, agents are smart, they can learn. Openly violating the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, that was signed by President Lyndon Johnson, and that older American Act, July 14, 1965, that was signed by President Lyndon Johnson. Bruce Harrell is in breach of contract because he refused to enforce the American with Disability Act because I'm black. But that violates the American with Disability Act, breach of contract, breach of trust or fraud intent, bipolar disorder, brain damage, cancer, discrimination, epilepsy, lung cancer, mental illness, neurological disorder, orthopedic disorder. I don't care what position you hold once you violate your oath of office. You will hear from me. And that's from Joe Biden on down. When you violate your oath of office. Now, United States versus Lee, meaning no man in this country is so high to where he's above the law. He or she. It don't have she in there, but let me put she in there. No man in this country is so high where you're above the law. Y'all. I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. When it comes to you violating your oath of office against we the people. And it's very devastating to me that we have to put up
Mr.
with
Fuller, your
unauthorized,
time has
undocumented
expired.
aliens.
Thank you.
Thank you.
$338.3 billion.
The next speaker on the list is Alex Zimmerman.
It devastates me.
Thank you. Mr. Zimmerman.
Mr. Zimmerman. Thank you.
My name Alex Zimmerman. Yeah. For last 2 years, I sit in home. Not exactly home. Look like a jail, yeah, for me. Yeah. So I have corona for 4 months in Overlake Hospital. I have 2 operations. I have dementia right now, and I have too many problems. Yeah. My life probably is right now much shorter than before. Yeah, it's exactly what the government did to us for the last 2 years. So when I speak something stupid, forgive me, you know what it means. I'm doing this from my heart, but my brain cannot control me. Thank you very much. So, the Heil, my lovely demo Nazi fascist mob bandita. Thank you very much for doing this. You opened door in concentration camp, what as we have for 2 years, for 80 million senior citizens who died from this reason, and nobody care about this. It's a problem what is we have. It is exactly what is I want to speak to you. But right now, I want to speak about something what has happened in Bellevue. It is exactly what has happened. 150,000 idiots who live in this city look to me like a half is a happy cow and half like a communist. This is exactly what is Bellevue have. Yeah, I live here for 35 years. Not exactly 35, but for 35 I'm here. So my situation right now very simple. Thank you very much for open door in concentration camp. So maybe we have right now a chance. Go back to America, what is we lose? New normal. This is exactly what is you see from all newspaper around this planet. Sorry, United States of America. So I speak right now to everybody who listen to me. Guy, stand up. We cannot bring America to concentration camp. Is this exactly what is Democrat, Nazi, fascist, you know what it means, with Gestapo principle start doing to us. Ever Hitler don't did this. Ever Stalin don't did this with all country. You understand what it means? You did this for last 2 years. It's very unique situation. So I'm Alex Zimmerman, speak to everybody who speak English, who listen to me. You understand what is I'm talking? Stand up America, stand up Bellevue, stand up everybody civilized people, because we need stop in this mafia bandita, this sleepy Joe, together with corporation who suck blood and money from us. 10% inflation. It's never happened in America for 10 years. They want money and money and money. It's never happened before with Trump. Nobody can touch Trump. We pay $2 for gas in Trump and $4 for this mafia, what is we have right now for last 2 years. It's exactly what's happened. So when American will be quiet, they will suck in blood and money from us for another 30 years. This is exactly what is I see for last 30 years. Thank you very much. Sie Heil, my Führer. Thank you very much.
The next 2 speakers on the list are Cutesy Jobs and Shoki Jobs. And I believe based on the topics you have signed up for, that you are here to speak about religious freedom regarding vaccine mandate. If that is not correct, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. We have reached 3 speakers on that topic. The next speaker is Christian Dorset. Mr. Dorset, are you in person or virtually participating? If you are virtually participating, can you please raise your hand so I can identify you? Does not appear that Mr. Dorset is here. The final speaker is Rocky Martinez. Ms. Martinez, if you're, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Martinez. Thank you. Sorry.
Good evening.
Mr. Martinez, were you going to speak about firefighter acceptance?
Yes, ma'am.
I apologize, but we have reached 3 speakers on that topic.
Okay.
A few minutes left of oral communications. If you are here to speak on a different, separate topic, please use the raise hand function if you're participating virtually. And Ms. Dean.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Heidi Dean here from Newport Hills. And it's good to be back in person after a long 2 years. And I think what I came to talk about was your discussion several weeks ago about allowing board and commission members to participate longstanding from a virtual mode. And as you can see tonight and from other meetings that we've had, take the sense, Energize East Side issue, rezones in my neighborhood at the Planning Commission. It is hard to determine, to do the people's work, as Councilmember Robertson said, from a virtual standpoint. Councilmember Zong, you had mentioned that to you it was more important to have support than butts and seats at those boards and commission meetings. And what I need to point out is that we currently have no mechanism for people who are participating virtually to show their support, for people giving public comment, or for discussion of topics. Because when you're able to see, you can see people raising their hands, as I often do. And then there's no mechanism for board or commission members who are participating virtually to be able to read the room. It's very often important to read body language, facial expressions, and to just see the number of people that are there in attendance in support of an issue. So I would really like you to consider that when you go and talk about whether or not to let people participate as board and commission members long-term from a virtual mode. And the other thing I wanted to bring up is I did see that the Parks and Open Space System Plan update was on your agenda. And there's really nothing about additional off-leash dog space there. And as we all know, it's needed. We are having more and more conflicts in our parks between park users there just to enjoy themselves and people bringing their dogs there. And we had the 2010 off-leash study that was done with Robbinswood. And, you know, that was supposed to be the expansion of Robbinswood off-leash area there. I am not really sure why off-leash areas aren't a priority in this update for this parks plan, given how much the need is there for this. I know that you can put an off-leash area at the south end of Surrey Downs Park and not even touch the rest of the park. Ashwood Park, please do the expansion at Robbinswood, but take the burden off of Newport Hills and Robbinswood Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. And we have reached the 30-minute mark, and that will close oral communications.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Next up is the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have 3 items on our study session list here. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce the first one?
Thank you, Mayor and Council members. The first topic on your study session is informational update on the city's Neighborhood Enhancement Program, also known as our NEP. And just by way of background, the NEP program is completing a 7-year cycle. And this evening, Council will be receiving an update on the program and lessons learned. Joining us this evening is Mike McCormick-Huntleman, who is the acting director, as well as Mark Heilman, neighborhood outreach coordinator, Teresa Cuthill, the neighborhood enhancement coordinator, all from the community development department. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the team for the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. It is absolutely a thrill to be with you in person tonight, and we're we're great to kind of kick off tonight with an update on the Neighborhood Enhancement Program. Thank you, City Manager Miyake. As mentioned, this program cycles through the city over a 7-year period. And this year, we're coming up at the end of our 7 years since the program was relaunched in 2015. So we do want to provide an update on some of the lessons learned in doing the program. The program is for information only, so we're not going to ask for any council direction tonight. But we do want to hopefully share some things in a familiar program that you may not know or are going to be new to you as well. Before we get started, I want to highlight a little bit about how the program operates within neighborhood services. As you know, neighborhood services really is about being attentive to improving the quality of life within our neighborhoods. And we do that through a lot of different programs and a lot of means. We're often the first point of contact for our residents for information or connection to city services. And for example, within Mini City Hall over the last 2 years, we responded to over 60,000 requests for assistance as we helped people connect to city services. We also really work hard at building community within neighborhoods. And we do that through different programs, such as our Cultural Conversations program. Right now, we're receiving requests for the summer and through our NeighborLink program as well. One of the things that you'll be looking at is an invitation for you to come and participate at our Neighborhoods Conference coming up in May, on May 14th for Experience Bellevue. We do seek to improve the quality of life of our neighborhoods really by listening to our residents and building partnerships. We do that through trying to broaden civic engagement and engaging our community on citywide initiatives as well. So this year we'll be celebrating our work within Bellevue Essentials as our 10th year and getting that off the ground as well. Tonight we're going to focus on how we partner with residents on neighborhood improvement projects and beautification of Bellevue's neighborhoods and the enhancement of our neighborhood character. And to kick us off tonight, I want to turn things over to Teresa. She is the Neighborhood Enhancement Program Coordinator and really the genius behind the program and how it operates. So Teresa.
Thank you, Mike, Mayor Robinson, and council members. To start off with, I'd like to provide you with a brief recap of what NEP is. As Mike said, NEP was on hiatus from 2009 to 2014, founded in 1988, and was brought back in 2015. NEP is a council-directed, city-funded capital improvements program that provides for residents the opportunity to propose and select small to moderate enhancement projects for their individual neighborhood areas. As previously approved by council from 2015 to 2022, NEP has had a $5 million budget to distribute among 14 designated neighborhood areas. Areas are allotted money based, or their budget is based on the number of households in each neighborhood area. And in the current cycle, this has ranged from $131,000 for the Wilburton neighborhood area to $508,000 in Lake Hills, which is the largest neighborhood area. The program rotates between through 2 neighborhoods areas per year. Currently, there's 25 NEP projects in planning or progress around the city in 9 neighborhood areas. NEP is supported by multiple city departments, including community development, parks, transportation, utilities, finance, and more. But NEP isn't just about NEP projects. It's a program that also helps inform the city about resident priorities and provides insight into resident needs across the city. Next slide, please. It's important to point out that NEP is an excellent example of the city's One City effort to be a collaborative and innovative organization that is future-focused and committed to excellence. NEP program management and budget may be based in the Community Development Department, but without the support from other city department project managers, the program would not be possible. This staff is necessary and a key component to the program's success. Project managers attend kickoff meetings and open houses in person, and in the past 2 years, they've been in Zoom breakout rooms working with residents. They review and scope all the project submissions against 6 NEP criteria, which include affordability, project costs must not exceed the funding allocation for the neighborhood area, Consistency, projects must be consistent with city plans and policies. Feasibility, projects must be practical and achievable for the city. Implementation, projects must be designed and constructed within 3 to 5 years of selection. Maintainability, projects must not require maintenance that is burdensome to the city. And public benefit, projects for NEP must be located on public property, easements, or property designated for public use and must benefit the general public. Finally, these project managers oversee the implementation and construction of the projects chosen by residents. Next slide, please. Over 1,300 project ideas submissions have been received during the 6 years since NEP was relaunched in 2015. Let me point out that these 1,300 submissions were not unique, and many of them ended up being outside of the scope of the NEP program, mostly due to budget limitations. After review by project managers, 219 projects were eligible for NEP funding and have been included on voters' pamphlets in 12 of the 14 neighborhood areas. These 219 balloted projects represent over $21 million in scoped project costs. Over 5,600 households have participated in voting, with 38 projects ultimately being selected for funding. Again, as you can see, the city receives many more suggestions through the NEP process that can be supported, but nothing goes to waste. All project submissions are shared with appropriate city departments for possible funding from other budget programs. So there are several requests that are common amongst all of the neighborhood areas. Dog parks, pickleball courts. Just to let you know that these requests come in through the NEP process and are shared, like with pickleball, with parks. Through the parks work right now, there are currently 17 of 37 tennis courts are now striped for pickleball, with new striping happening as courts are resurfaced. Crosswalks are also a popular request, and sidewalks. Overall, the most requested type of project through NEP, sidewalks.
So we appreciate the things that residents share with us, and we feel a responsibility to share those things back with council as well and publicly also. So some of the things we'd also like to share are some of those very unique projects that come in from residents, and actually some of these have come about as actual NEP projects. So a project that was recommended for balloting was a bee pollinator interpretive display, bat houses, bocce ball, palm trees, neighborhood brew house. And I do need to point out this was a group of boys through Boy Scouts and Bridal Trails that suggested 7-Elevens and Slurpees on every corner. And then adult exercise equipment, which also came about as an actual NEP project. But we really appreciate that residents engage creatively with us and with one another. And then through that, there have been a number of great ideas that have ended up being very useful and productive and helpful projects. This is one that is in Bridal Trails at elementary school. And the concern was that it was not a safe place for children to cross. And this ended up becoming the first crayon, I guess I don't say Crayola, crayon, project that had the markings on the street to provide kind of a creative and distinctive way for kids to cross the street, and really for drivers and bicyclists to be very noticing of the children in the area. And then also projects around the city. Downtown Park has, the suggestion was, for stairs on the southeast quadrant of the park, because people were walking there, and so it actually provided a way for people to enjoy the park and to leave and enter. Trails in Northeast, and a playground that I've actually taken my granddaughters to, and we started a neighborhood walk at last year. And then in Eastgate, at park there, the residents said was just not safe as kids were walking back and forth to school, particularly during the wintertime, the morning and evening. So an art project that actually includes light as well. So projects that came from residents that are useful to them and to the whole region as well.
As mentioned, NEP is able to capture resident input into their interests and what they would like to see in their community. To maintain existing and expand new relationships with corporate community that support corporate goals, last year when community partner Amazon came to the city offering support, we were able to quickly provide a list of small capital projects at their request that we already knew residents were asking for. As part of the $1.4 million donation from Amazon in May 2021, 2 projects that went unfunded as part of the NEP program, a public art at Crossroads International Park and cleanup of children's artwork tiles along Northeast 8th in the Wilburton area, and 1 project that was already funded but we were able to expand, which was bat houses in the Lake Hills Greenbelt, were included in Amazon's generous donation for neighborhood enhancement projects. This is an example of how corporate partners can partner with the city to invest in our neighborhoods. A couple of NEP projects have grown in scope from the initial chosen balloted project. One example, the enhancement of the crossing on the Northeast 8th Bridge over I-405. Funding from and partnership with other city budgets will help to enhance this project even further. The initial request from downtown residents to improve the pedestrian experience while crossing this area will not only improve the requested safety elements, but now also landscaping and other amenities from partnership with the urban boulevards and downtown livability budgets. Next slide. Another example, a grant from the Department of Ecology that will help the city engineer a new stormwater facility along the roadway to improve water quality within the Kelsey Creek Basin will help provide more than just a landscape beautification project for the 164th Avenue Northeast NEP project along the east side of the street from Northeast 8th to Northup.
There are a number of outreach lessons that we've learned and that we have so much contact with residents. As Teresa mentioned, there are 5 pieces of mail that go to every household in the entire city, communicating the opportunity and then communicating the opportunity for folks to vote as well. So some things that we have learned, and there have been a number of others as well, but in-person outreach to multifamily community managers has provided new relationships, resident participation, and understanding of the community. And this is something that Teresa initiated, I think about 3.5 years ago, in Bridal Trails, an area that I really didn't realize was part of Bridal Trails, and just a very high portion of multifamily communities. And just going door to door, we've kind of made our practice pre-COVID, and we look forward to doing this in the future as well, of taking a couple days and going to those multifamily communities. And we've just learned a lot, just kind of getting in our cars and walking and kind of going door to door to those managers. Next, NEP resident ideas and requests inform other departments about community needs and priorities. As Teresa mentioned, this is a one-city effort, but not just to get things done, but to inform and to know some of the things that are very important to our residents. And then third, residents' NEP ideas can become much bigger projects, as Teresa mentioned, because things that they have initiated that there ends up being funding for. And then we have learned that virtual meetings have drawn additional residents and in many ways have worked well. We look forward to having some of those meetings in person and some of them virtually, but we will continue to research that. But NEP has really helped us to learn a lot about in-person and remote meetings. And then next, something that Teresa piloted in the Crossroads area. Spanish is our second language that's spoken. Most common language that was spoken, and just before COVID we did a kickoff meeting at Stevenson Elementary, had partnered with wraparound staff there and with the PTO, and instituted and really kind of introduced at that time that we were going to do the entire program in both English and Spanish. And we actually did get a number of comments back and opportunities to engage with the public. As with any pilot, we learned some things and we look forward to expanding that in the future. Next, some of the outcomes we're beginning to track, and we have not throughout the program's history, but are doing more and more. This is a map that shows distribution of households that responded to NEP in the Lake Hills neighborhood area. So you can see just throughout the entire neighborhood, there were folks that had responded. Those represent individual households. Multifamily, single-family households throughout the entire area. One of the other things that we're beginning to track the last couple of years is in West Bellevue, which is where we were last year, and we had hoped to be able to do quite a bit of door-to-door reaching out to multifamily, but did see that of all of the responses that we got back in West Bellevue, 19% of those came from multifamily residents. So we're going to continue to track that and help that number to continue to go up. Also, NEP is much more than a capital project and leading to great projects. In the Crossroads area, Teresa did door-to-door and reached out to the very new Crossroads Senior Living. I think she reached out to them before they actually had a mailbox and helped get their mail to them very early, which I think we're allowed to do. But Crossroads Senior Living, we had a number of ballots that came back, but we also met Victor, who has ended up becoming someone who's been a great asset to us of knowing what's happening in senior communities and giving us idea of how to reach out to other senior living communities. And last year when we were doing virtual neighborhood walks, Victor was actually the one that provided the virtual neighborhood walk and insight into his neighborhood and into seniors. And through that then, as transportation was looking to do a commercial around Crossroads Connect program, we asked Victor, do you have someone that could do a commercial for us? And he pointed us towards Suzanne Ruggles, who ended up being on a commercial for transportation. So we love the big projects, but we also very much appreciate that we have extended time with residents to learn about what's important to them and what's important to them about our community. So where are we now?
Well, in 2022, we finish out the current 7-year CIP cycle in the Newport and Somerset neighborhood areas. We just finished up the scoping phase for Newport. An open house is scheduled in June to announce those projects that will be included on the Newport ballot. And earlier this month, we launched NEP in the Somerset neighborhood area and currently are in the project submission phase through May 18th. Finally, I wanted to share these words from a Lake Hills resident in his testimonial about the program that was featured in the NEP informational video that we produced in early 2020. Randy in Lake Hills said, "Neighborhoods are important to the city. They're willing to invest in them and they're willing to listen to the people who live in the neighborhoods on what's important to us. It's one of the many reasons why I am very proud to call the city of Bellevue my home."
So Council, thank you for the opportunity to serve with NEP, to be able to reach out to our residents and to our community, to learn from them, share back with you, but also to meet with you. Appreciate all the time that you have spent in the different neighborhoods remotely. We've all learned a lot through that. We look forward to doing more and more in person, but we're going to try to capture whatever we can that's very helpful, that's going to be as equitable and accessible as possible in adding additional opportunities to do things remotely and virtually. So. That's the end of our presentation. We'll take questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you for that great presentation. Really appreciate it. So this is information only, but if anybody has comments or questions, I see Councilmember Zahn, followed by Councilmember Barksdale, and then Councilmember Robertson.
Yeah, I just want to express appreciation for staff for the continual efforts with the NEP. It's such an amazing program. And, you know, when I think about it, it isn't the projects, because I've been to so many of them when they were in person and virtual. It's about the connection, the collaboration, the community. The projects are a part of it, but what I see is the engagement with the community in ways that, you know, we may not have that same richness of that connection without the program, so I really appreciate it. I also appreciate the fact that we are seeing some corporate partners come in, the fact that we have so many projects and we can't always get them funded. Means that we need to reach out and see if we can get some sponsors that are willing to put some money on the table to help us out with that. So I would say let's keep doing that part of it, and maybe Economic Development Department has some other sponsorship connections for that. And then the multifamily connection and the community-based organization, I really appreciate that, because, you know, what's our data show? 50% of residents in Bellevue are renters, and a number of them are in the multifamily units. So how do we make sure that they feel that same level of community and connection? And these projects are huge. And I appreciate the fact that we're using data informed. So so the fact that we're measuring where these ballots are coming from, I think are huge. And I would just actually give one anecdote, because I remember when I've attended these, it wasn't even only the projects. What I also saw happen with so many staff that are there is some of the things that are brought up, you're dealt with immediately. I remember when, I think it was Lake Hills, someone said, you know, there's a light that shines right into my house, right? And what you guys said was, hey, if you go into this room, this person will help you right now. right? So instead of waiting, we have this opportunity to help people right where they are. So just appreciate all the work you do. And actually, we're in my neighborhood in Newport right now, and I'm excited to see what ideas my neighbors come up with to be able to vote on those. So thank you.
Councilmember Barksdale.
Thank you, Mayor. Echo Councilmember Zahn's sentiments. Thank you, and really appreciate the work that you're doing in the community to understand the needs. I do have a few questions. How are we working with the community-based organizations as another way of reaching out to multifamily residents or just the broad diversity of residents? Then I'm curious also about not just sort of physical projects, if you will, but also events. I mean, just because we have the physical spaces, right, that we're creating through the program, but also the events provide a way to activate those spaces. And so I'm curious if we're learning anything about that, not to share tonight, but just if that's making its way to elsewhere in the city. And then will the open house be virtual or hybrid? I'll stop there.
For Newport? Which of it it'll be in person.
Only?
Only, yeah, at this point.
We're going to be at the elementary school on the top of the hill.
Okay. I would advocate for hybrid, especially given the point that you made during the presentation that virtual has its benefits in terms of access. So be interested in that.
Thank you. We are continuing to learn how we do hybrid, so we are going to continue to learn and adjust along the way. But Mike, you want to address the possibility of events with NEP?
So typically, NEP is funded through the CIP and funds capital projects, and we don't fund events or community events through that process. So anything that's a program or event is not funded through NEP.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I think just given the fact that this is also a program that helps identify broader needs in the community from our neighborhood residents, I think I would encourage that we also maybe consider how we can understand those needs and pass those to like maybe the special events committee or what have you, just to see maybe what barriers. I know there's some interest, for example, in having block parties, and I know there are some that happen throughout the city periodically, but I know there are some that there's also some interest. So, for example, understanding that and figuring out how to get more of that information out to the community. It may not fall under CIP funding, but it might fall under somewhere else in the city.
There might be a way of kind of continuing to look at how to support events like that through our NeighborLink program, which would be more suited for that.
Thank you.
And then Teresa, have we had community-based orgs that we've been able to connect with yet?
Not that I've worked with. Most of our multifamily outreach has been just direct, not through groups.
Direct mail. So we'll take that into account and see how we can connect with some of those organizations.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
Thanks. I love this program. I love this program. And I remember when it was on the chopping block in, I think, 2010, it was up for complete cut. The council being so interested in making sure that all of our neighborhoods get some attention and time, we paused it, made it bigger, and started again. So we're almost at the end of that first full round of the newer, bigger program. So, and I love it because it's not only about building projects the community wants and making sure that all of our neighborhoods get some love, but it's about interconnectedness, connecting community members to each other as they do through the outreach and through the process, and also connecting them to the city so that the light that's shining in their bedroom window can get fixed and that their ideas don't just die if they don't become an NEP project, whether it's an event that Councilmember Barksdale was mentioning or something that's too large for the project budget. It gets routed through the city, so people do get their voices heard, and I just want to say how much I love that. So I also really love how we're starting to do more outreach in foreign language. It's something we've been getting better and better at over the last 10 plus years. One thing that I don't know if you have an answer tonight, but one thing that I would be interested to have a follow-up on when we're done with this first full funding round, I know Somerset's the last, is whether I'd like to do some reflection on that, if there's a sliver of time between when that's wrapping up and the next round begins, to see if, one, we think we had the bigger amounts of money was enough money. Because I know there's often requests for the bigger projects. And when we restructured the program, one of the reasons we did that is that we found that all the little stuff was already done. And so we put bigger money, it came less often. I'd like to know if we're getting to the point where the things at that level are done. If there still can be projects going forward, if that's still the right size for the program. And then also maybe how we might do better, and lessons learned from this full round. I think that we've been getting better. I love the outreach to the multifamily housing as a way to get those folks involved, the foreign language. So what are the things that we might want to adopt as more of the MO, if you will, going forward for the next round? I would be very curious to hear your reflections on that, if you have them now or at some point down the road. So.
I think down the road, we'd be glad to do that.
Perfect, I would love it.
Appreciate the question.
You bet.
I remember before I was on the council, participating in this in my neighborhood, and I just thought it was the greatest program. It's so responsive, and it adjusts to emerging needs, and it continues to do that. And I like the new recommendations from the council here tonight on how we can continue to adapt as our community evolves. So thank you for the presentation, and thank you for all the great work you do on this.
It's great to have you all back together.
Yeah.
Thank you for supporting the program.
So I'm going to take a break here. We'll come back at 7:12. Back, everybody. We are on to our, excuse me.
Staff.
That's all right. So we are on to our second study session item. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce it? Your mic's not on, I don't think.
I know the mute button's not on.
I think it's on now, yeah.
Okay, there you
Go
go.
ahead.
I'll start again. So then, next topic on your agenda this evening, council members, is the ongoing conversation regarding future parks funding strategy. Just by way of background, developing a future parks funding strategy was one of 4 council priorities that emerged out of your 2021 council retreat. This strategy will include consideration of new funding sources for operations, maintenance, and construction. And so tonight, staff are seeking direction in 3 areas. The first one is, would the council like staff to research and bring back additional information for consideration of a future voter-approved ballot measure? That's number 1. Second, if the council decides to go forward with a voter-approved ballot, would the council like the park board to play an additional role in the preparation of the future ballot measure? And then third, is the council interested in initiating a future park impact fee study for purposes of raising additional revenue to develop and support the city's park system? This is all in line with some of the budget conversations that you had earlier this year with regard to the need for additional revenue for the city. So joining us this evening are Michael Shiosaki, Director of the Parks and Community Services Department, as well as Tony Call, Director of Finance and Asset Management. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn over to you two.
Great, thank you, City Manager Miyake, and good evening, Mayor Robinson and members of the City Council. I'm Michael Shiosaki, and I am joined by Tony Call, the Director of Finance and Asset Management. So next slide, please.
Continue on.
Okay.
Takes a minute.
So as the city manager just mentioned, tonight we're asking for your direction on 3 things, and we'll try to emphasize those 3 things and pause at the end of each section so there's a chance to ask questions and have discussion. So the first of the 3 main issues are whether to proceed after tonight's discussion with having staff do additional information gathering on a voter initiative for parks capital needs. The second is the Parks and Community Services Board role, and there is a staff recommendation on that piece, and that would be to have the Park Board confirm the community priorities that have been gathered through the Parks and Open Space System Plan update process. And last of all, is the council interested in the staff initiating a parks impact fee after we bring back the information we have tonight? Just that would be the next step in the process. So here is our agenda. So first I'll provide some background and a quick timeline in looking forward, specifically what we are following up on this evening. Then the parks capital needs as identified through the Parks and Open Space System Plan update process. Then I will review the current parks capital funding picture. And then the three items we're asking for direction on again are about this potential parks voter initiative, the park board role, and then the park impact fee discussion and study. So this whole discussion really began with your adopted council priority number 9, which is to advance a parks funding strategy, including consideration of new funding sources for operations, maintenance, and capital. And tonight's presentation is really a staff follow-up on your priority. So back on March 7th at your council budget workshop, staff provided an overview of the parks long-range capital plan, and we also provided additional information on additional voter-approved initiatives such as bonds or levies, impact fees, and other potential funding mechanisms or new tax sources. Then, as part of your March 28th council meeting, the council reviewed the 2022 update of the Parks and Open Space System Plan. And the system plan is really the primary tool used to guide the long-term growth and development of Bellevue's Parks and Open Space System. From extensive public engagement, community needs, and park system gaps have been identified, and they are shown in this update of that system plan. Council provided feedback at that time, and we will return a little bit later in the spring for final adoption of that plan update. So this timeline really focuses on the path ahead and the touch points for the City Council, and I'll say that is if the Council directs us to continue research into a potential voter-approved funding option. So this is what the timeline for 2022 would look like. And so I just mentioned the March 7th council meeting, followed by the March 28th council meeting. That brings us to tonight, April 18th, and kind of the quick steps in moving forward. So in 2 days from now at the park board meeting, we would be taking to them for discussion what those community priorities would be that have come out of the Parks and Open Space System Plan update. We would be asking for them to start to formulate a recommendation that would, we hope, be finalized at the May 10th Park Board meeting. So it all moves very quickly, and these would be the overall kind of broad categories for funding. What did they hear from the community that should be priorities that would then come to you for greater discussion? And that would be in a series of council meetings in June. So in June, we'd be seeking additional direction from you following the park board recommendation. And then we specifically in June need direction on which funding mechanism should move forward, and then what would the rate be if it is a bond or levy, and the specific package of projects that would then go to the voters. That would be all in June, and then followed in July. In early July, staff would provide the draft ballot language to you. And then kind of a key date on here is July 25th. So council action would be required to meet the August 2nd election, general election filing date. So August 2nd, so we'd need that, and that would be your final opportunity on July 25th. So potential action that night could include adoption of an ordinance authorizing a ballot measure for the November general election. And if council authorizes a ballot measure, it also requires a resolution to appoint pro and con committees to prepare statements for the voters' pamphlet. So that's a quick timeline in moving forward. So once again tonight, the specific pieces we're following up with you on are the voter-approved initiatives, a bond or levy, with an option to retire the current 08 parks levy, and then finally information on a park impact fee. So at the March 28th council meeting, we presented the update of the Parks and Open Space System Plan, and really the heart of that plan is a set of 20-year capital project objectives. And these long-term objectives are reviewed and updated about every 6 years. So from July of last year to February of this year, the Parks and Community Services Board and staff conducted extensive public outreach to collect feedback and opinions from Bellevue residents and park users on how the Parks and Open Space System is currently used and how what the priorities should be for the future. And I did want to just take a minute and thank the Parks and Community Services Board for their significant role in the plan update and the community engagement. 2 surveys were conducted as a part of that, and one was statistically valid. And the following is really a list of possible parks and recreation facilities being considered or typically considered for development. And the list shows that the community's park development priorities are really consistent with the park use data and the reasons for using parks data that we also gathered. So as you see on the list, once again, and this has been consistent over many decades of park surveys, that it's about open space and trails. People want to be out there walking, experiencing fresh air. In addition, I think in Bellevue, people want public access to the waterfront. In addition, followed by other indoor and outdoor recreational opportunities. So just one more thought on the previous slide. So the results of the surveys also show the Bellevue community more generally supports expansion of the park system through projects that preserve natural areas and trails, add neighborhood parks, complete existing parks, and then also provide, once again, waterfront access. So the Parks and Open Space System Plan, and I've kind of, oops, there we go, lost my notes here. It identifies a menu of desired capital project needs over the next 20 years, and the system plan isn't constrained by a budget amount, and projects included far exceed budgeted funds available. The funding strategy of the plan is general and assumes that the CIP is the foundation for property acquisition, capital construction, renovation, and planning. And the Parks and Open Space System Plan capital focus areas are shown on this plan, along with rough order of magnitude project costs for the 20-year plan. As you can see, that totals to about $750 million to $1 billion. So that's kind of the overall need over 20 years. Next slide. So one key funding source for capital projects has been the 2008 Parks and Natural Areas Levy. The 08 levy passed with 67% voter approval and was structured on a 20-year pay-as-you-go capital levy for property acquisition and park development. And there was a separate permanent maintenance levy to support maintenance and operations of those projects. Examples of notable projects were the Downtown Park completed the Circle Project, the Northeast Corner Gateway, Surrey Downs Neighborhood Park Development, the Botanical Garden Visitor Center, and these were funded in part by the levy, but there are also several other projects. All but 2 capital projects from the 08 levy have been completed. Those 2 remaining projects are Airfield Park and a neighborhood park along Lake Sammamish. So the city will continue to collect capital funds from this measure through 2028, and the estimated total revenue of about $20.4 million remains to be collected, and that's a key piece because we were asked about retiring the current levy. So this slide shows all parks capital funding sources, and currently the real estate excise tax, or REIT, provides parks capital funding of approximately $10 million annually. REIT is difficult to predict funding stream as it's based on the sales of real property in Bellevue. Total REIT is allocated by city ordinance 50% to transportation capital and 50% to parks capital. And of the $10 million per year in parks allocated funding, about $7 million of that supports the park's major maintenance and renovation plan, leaving about $3 million per year for all property acquisition and park development needs. And so REIT funding alone is inadequate to make significant near-term improvements given the size and scale of the park system needs identified in the Parks and Open Space System Plan and council priorities. Parks also receives development incentive fees from the Bellevue area and downtown. Revenues from these sources are a bit hard to predict as developers decide on whether to construct the amenities on site or pay in lieu fees. To date, park in lieu fees amount to about $7.5 million in the Bellevue area and about $34,000 in downtown. So CIP funds have also been augmented by voter initiatives such as the King County Parks Levy and external funding sources like grants, partnerships, and donations, and these help leverage city resources. Currently, the REIT funding, the levy funding, and all the sources, they are estimated to total to about $300 million over the next 20 years. Based on the estimated capital project needs in the Parks and Open Space System Plan, the existing funding would support about 34% of potential need. And this, of course, leaves a gap somewhere between $500 million to about $750 million. And with that, I will now hand this off to Tony Call. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Shiosaki. Mayor and council members, as always, it's a pleasure to be with you this evening. As Director Shiosaki mentioned, we are seeking feedback on whether staff should proceed to continue to do information gathering on a voter-approved package for parks. In order to provide you with a sense of options and what those options might generate, we have a couple of slides here that talk about the options that are available as well as the funding that might be done. If directed by council, staff would then return back to you in June with a more coalesced set of options for your consideration. We need to think about things like what's on the project list, what's the timing of those projects? Do we need cash up front? Do we need cash at the back? Do we need to think about the market conditions of the time? So we'll come back with all of that information. So tonight, we're not asking for direct feedback in any of these specifics pieces. They really are here for context. So the three basic ways that this chart shows, the three basic ways that a municipality can do a levy are the three that you see here. I'm going to talk about the first two, the 9-year bond and the 20-year pay-as-you-go kind of as a collective, and then I'll talk about the way that that's different from the end one. So for those first two options, you'll notice that it's 50% approval. It's actually 50% plus one vote would get to an approval, simple majority passage for both of those options. Does not require a prior voter validation attached to it. And under both of these options, the council has the choice, if you choose to proceed, of looking at a single ballot measure for capital and M&O together, or doing as we have done historically, which is separate the capital and the M&O into two packages. So again, that's a choice that would be in front of council in June. The first option is a 9-year bond, which means that the levy would last for 9 years, and we would use the proceeds from the levy to issue debt, come up with a debt service number, and come up with a principal package that would be upfront cash available for distribution. The second option is what we currently have done here at the city at both the parks levy, as well as the transportation levy, and well as the fire levy. They're all 20-year pay-as-you-go options. The piece that's not on this chart, and staff did make an assessment to do a 20-year option for the option tonight, but in reality, the number of years is a choice up to permanent. So staff has chosen 20-year to coalesce the options down. It's not the only choice available. All right? Moving on to the last column, which is the excess levy or a voter-approved bond. As I was thinking about coming tonight, I was trying to remember the last time there was a package that I voted on to kind of give you an example. And the one that came to mind was the King County Harborview bonds. There's been many times in the past that King County has put a bond package on the table to improve Harborview. That would have been using this choice. It requires a 60% voter-approved passage. So the other ones were simple majority. This is a super majority. And it does have a voter validation option, which means that 40% of the number of city voters who voted in the last general state election or the last November election have to vote. Once that number is cleared, then it's a 60% approval rate. So it's a two test to get to passage. I'm seeing some nodding, so I think everybody understood that. In this case, that excess levy can only be spent on capital. So in this case, it would require a separate capital versus M&O ballot. All right, so these are the three general ways. There are nuances attached to this, and I'm not going to go over all the nuances, but as we move forward, we will bring back that information. I'm going to take a couple of slides now and talk about each of these options and what they could generate under a variety of different looks, all right? So moving on to the 9-year levy, the chart you see in front of you is the same chart you're going to see 3 more times. So I'll explain it once, and then we can maybe move the other ones a little bit quicker. So this is the 9-year levy. The first line in that box up there says the cost per 1 million property annually. So if a property owner who has $1 million property, if their taxes increased by $50 annually, that would generate a tax levy rate of 5 cents, which is the second line down. And that 5 cents would generate for the city a total annual amount coming to the city of 3.9 or just about $4 million. We have three other options on the table just to give an order of magnitude. If the property increases by $100, it's a 10-cent levy. You can follow the math, all the way up to $200. So if someone's taxes increased by $200 annually, it's a 20-cent levy, and it generates about $15.5 million. Under the 9-year levy, this is a 9-year bond, and the tax would then end, as would the levy would end, at 9 years. And if it was the $50 option, it would generate proceeds of about $30 million to invest in parks. And you can see the other amounts that are invested. Did that track for everyone? Perfect. So moving on to the next slide. This is the regular 20-year pay-as-you-go. Again, there are other options than 20 years, and it can be permanent. Giving you an example, at 20 years, those same 4 options of the $50, $100, it's the same levy rates, the 5, the 10, the 15, the 20, and the same annual tax dollars amount. In this case, 20 years, pay as you go. At $50, you would generate about $77 million to invest in parks. And if you had a $200 increase for that $1 million property, you'd be at about $300 million to invest in parks over 20 years. Moving on to the next slide. And the last example I have for you today is the excess levy. Same charts across the top. You can see them all, they're the exact same numbers. And you head down to the bond value. So under an excess levy, staff chose 20 years because it's consistent with other things across the city. You actually can go up to 40 years if you so chose. Again, nuance, we don't need to kind of hit that level. But in this case, that 20-year bond at 3% interest would be just shy of $60 million at the $50 increase. And about $229 million when you get up to that 20-cent levy or that $200 increase on the $1 million property. All right? So the last slide I have for you before I turn it back to Mr. Shiosaki is actually all that data shown on one slide, just so that you can understand the relative comparison of what those numbers are. There's a couple of things I want to mention here. Again, it's a comparison so you can see what they all look like. Again, order of magnitude, choice to give you context so you understand kind of what the size of the bread box is. Again, not looking for a specific answer or specific direction on type or rate. I think what this chart really shows is the chart that Director Shiosaki showed you a minute ago showed the gap of about $580 million. The scenarios that staff ran for just order of magnitude, the largest one gets you at 20-year at capital levy of $300 million. So under any scenario, it is feasible that choices need to be made as you decide how to proceed and what the funding package for parks might look like. With that, I will turn it back over to Michael to take us to the next slide.
Please. So this is a chance to pause and have a discussion on this item. And so tonight, to be clear, we're not asking for a choice on any one of those levies or bonds. Just would you like us to continue moving forward with providing additional information as you need? So you don't have to make a choice, just should this effort continue moving forward?
Thank you. Councilmember Zahn, since you're the liaison to the Parks Board, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Thank you very much. I think it is very important to do this work now so we can understand what our options are. And I appreciate the fact that you've created some scenarios for us so we can get a better understanding for that. I do have a couple of questions related to those examples, or I guess maybe my first question would be this. When we look at the current bond that we have and retiring it early, are we expecting to get more favorable rates right now? I mean, there's a lot of discussion going on about interest rates going up and some volatility related to that. So I would like to understand that, because it does appear to me that we should be considering this, but I think it's important for us to understand that context a little bit more than what's in the packet.
Certainly, I'll start in, and Director, if you have something you want to add, feel free. The current park levy that we currently have is actually as a pay-as-you-go levy, so we have not bonded any portion of the existing park levy. So if you did choose to head towards a bonding environment, yes, interest rates are definitely increasing. And what they would be when we would go to market a year from now or whenever that might be, they might be completely different than today. So I tend to think about those things as is it the right thing to do for the city to have what it is the council wishes to invest in? But yes, interest rates are definitely increasing, and what they look like a year from now, I can only guess. Does that help answer your question, Councilmember?
Yeah, it does. And I appreciate the fact that we're looking at both options, because I tend to also, I'm seeing that with escalation and inflation, things are only getting more expensive. So looking at both, whether we would continue to look at a pay-as-you-go model or bonding against those future revenues so that we're actually able to build more for our money than waiting, because escalation and inflation will eat our lunch. So I appreciate these options, and I support having a voter initiative review and looking at the possibilities. Thanks.
Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. Yes, I strongly support continuing to move forward on this and looking at all of the options. As Councilmember Zahn said, things only get more expensive. And frankly, our open space that is not in public ownership is only getting more rare in Bellevue. So I think that doing this year, should everything time out and the information prove out, be the right thing to do. So I'm absolutely in favor of moving forward. And I also, in addition to things getting more expensive, as we know from every levy we've ever passed, including the current parks one, the purchasing power goes down. Because although assessed value goes up, especially in Bellevue, much higher than the rate of inflation, which has been low until the last 12 or 15 months, they only go up 1% a year. So how much they can buy actually goes down. We see this with a lot, when the Medic 1 levy was updated, even just the same millage rate as was passed 6 or 8 years before brought in a whole lot more money, because the millage rate actually goes down over time as the value of the properties go up. So I would be more leaning towards the 9-year bond or the voted bond, but that's a decision for another day. The decision today is whether you should continue information gathering. Yes, 2 thumbs up. I'm in favor. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Barksdale.
Points have already been made, so yes, I support.
I agree.
Proceeding.
Great. Okay. So this is the next discussion item, number 2. So we heard the update of the Parks and Open Space System Plan included extensive public engagement, and that process has just been completed. So given the Parks and Community Services Board's role in that public engagement for the plan update, Park staff are recommending that the board role, should a bond or levy move forward, would be to confirm the community's priorities that came out of that process. And so this would be making recommendations on, I would say, the broader buckets, the kinds of projects, whether it's active recreation or open space and trails. So those broader buckets, and leaving you with those, making a recommendation to you on what those priorities would be. And then you would then be the ones responsible for doing the actual project selection. Part of this is because we're on a pretty rigorous timeline, and then partly we thought reserving those decisions for the council made sense, as that's been kind of a typical path in the past. So. So that quickly goes to the second area for question and discussion.
So, Mayor.
And that would be on the park board roll if you,
Okay.
yeah, sorry,
Somehow I
I
thought you
could
were
be
gonna
more
finish
specific
up.
there.
Just waiting for the final
Yes.
statement there.
Sorry.
So go ahead, Councilmember Zahn.
Yeah, thank you. Well, so I agree that I do believe that the Parks Board has a role in this, and we want to leverage their expertise to help us confirm the categories. And I also heard you say that the council would retain the authority on the projects themselves. I do have a question, though, that I want to get some clarity on when we talk about projects and where they go in the buckets. So if I look at attachment A, and I notice that we have in the active recreation facilities, the community centers and those projects are in there. The off-leash dog areas are also in there. I know that there was some public comment about whether it was in the priorities, and I do see that in there under active recreation. The aquatic center is in there. I'm curious about why the cross-cultural facility is in the partnership opportunities and not in the active recreation, since that, I believe, is closer to community centers and facilities than it is sitting by itself in the partnership opportunities. So I'm a little bit, I don't think I understand yet, so if you could help me with understanding how it got put in that category.
Yes, certainly. So, I think at this point, and the cross-cultural study is about to come back to the council. It looks like it may be sometime in early May. I think we're waiting for some specific recommendations out of that study and your council discussion. I think it was seen as perhaps a facility that might be run through some kind of partnership. It may not be, it could be led by the city or through a partnership with another private nonprofit. So it seemed like since there's been so much community support, that there might be the other leg of this, not just the city running such a facility. And that's why it ended up in the partnership bucket, and probably wasn't necessarily seen as active recreation as you might think of soccer and aquatics and some of those things.
Well, and that's why I brought it up, because I want to make sure that it doesn't get put in a place where it doesn't get the same level of priority, because I would say that certainly the level of community support and engagement for the cross-cultural facility, as well as the aquatic center, but I noticed the aquatic center is squarely in the other category, even though I would expect we're going to have lots of partnerships to make that project happen. So I would like to make sure that that is not a project that doesn't get the attention it needs. I mean, certainly the cross-cultural study has not been run out of the Parks Board as well. So I agree with the Parks Board role here. I just want to make sure that that other really important community need has that same level of highlight and priority as the other things that are on here. So.
It seems like some of these projects also have partnership opportunities, and maybe we should be keeping them on a main list and highlighting those that also have partnership opportunities. Okay.
And we believe, should a bond or levy move forward, leveraging those dollars is certainly an important part of any bond or levy, leveraging the public dollars with private dollars and nonprofit funds.
Yeah. So perhaps while the Parks Board's looking at it, you said that they were looking at the buckets, getting a little more clarity back to us about what these buckets actually are and what they mean, so that we don't inadvertently give indicators to the community about importance of some and not as much for others. Thanks.
I'm going to go to Councilmember Barksdale next.
So I like the roles, the roles that you have in there currently, or responsibilities you have in there currently. I guess one question is, just historically, how have boards and commissions played a role in levies?
I'm told in the 08 levy, they had they had more of this, well, I guess the Parks and Open Space System Plan update didn't exactly lead right into the next levy, so there was a bit more public engagement that they took on as a part of it. And I guess in this instance, that's been combined with the Parks and Open Space System Plan update. So I think engaging with the community has always been a part of that. The previous levy, I think once again, the project selection was reserved for the city council.
I like what you have here in terms of responsibilities.
Councilmember Roberts? Yeah, me too. I think that it dovetails really nicely with them just finishing. They did a lot of public engagements for that open space and parks plan update, and now then just coming into this, it's going to dovetail really nicely. And so, yes, I do support having the Parks Board have a role. I hope that they will look particularly at things like areas of the city that are underserved, like the Eastgate area, things that the council has prioritized, like the Aquatic Center, and things that there's a big public demand for. So I would as we get, the buck stops with us ultimately in picking the projects, but I'd love to get their input to the extent there's time to do on what they think meets the screening criteria the best, and how we can serve the people. Like we talked about NEP tonight, it was about serving everyone in Bellevue. That's what our Parks and Open Space and Rec system should also do. So, thanks.
So what's the value system that they're using to make their priorities? Is that through the same guidelines that we have in the Parks and Open Spaces work? So, I mean, you know, you look at this list, this huge list, and how do you determine what you're going to prioritize? What value system are we asking the Parks Board to look at?
Well, you know, I obviously, I think in Bellevue, we're looking at equity as clearly one of the primary things. I think we're looking at equity. I think we're looking at geographic distribution. We're looking at service areas. I think we're also listening to the public. What has the community identified as needs out there? And I think it's also looked at, you know, from a staff standpoint, what are the gaps as we look at service areas too. So there's been that piece, but I think equity is certainly a significant lens that we're looking, that we'd be making any of these recommendations to you.
I feel like when I was on the Parks Board, the council did a transmittal to the Parks Board asking us to make decisions based on this criteria. I wonder if that would be helpful for the council to transcribe something to the Parks Board.
Okay.
Any thoughts?
Do we have time to do that? That was my question.
Okay.
Well, and I was going to say, because the projects stay with us, and what they're doing is reconfirming the buckets, I think we would still retain that priority. So perhaps the question is that something we can do for ourselves so that when it comes back and we are prioritizing the projects for if we're only raising X number of dollars, what's above the line and below the line, that is still an important thing to generate, but perhaps not necessarily for the Parks Board to do their work in this role they're doing, but when it comes back before we actually put something on the ballot, actually getting the projects. Because I think that, you know, the other question I have is certainly inflation and escalation is really huge right now. So when we look at how much the need is, it's not clear to me that the $880 million is really the right number versus something that potentially might be higher. So it'd be even more important to have that priority and the value proposition so that we can best understand how we're going to make those decisions and not wait until, you know, the July or June timeframe to then just be scrambling trying to figure out how we're going to decide.
Or did you have that? No, I'll come back to you.
I guess I have a question. So the buckets are gonna, if we're gonna make the final decision on the projects, which makes sense, what is the Park Board gonna do? I mean, because it sounds like, I mean, if it's just about categorizing the existing projects, but that doesn't, I guess just building on the Mayor's question, how is that gonna inform our discussion about at the project level, if that makes sense? Because we're not gonna vote at the bucket level, we're gonna vote at the project level, so I'm curious.
Well, you know, I think that provides the first lens in looking at kinds of projects. And I would think that there's probably going to be a little further breakdown than that. It isn't going to be 5 categories. You know, if you look at perhaps park development in general, I think we've heard a lot about the need for additional neighborhood parks and looking at geographic equity. You know, it might go as far as saying neighborhood parks are priority, but it isn't necessarily going to name X, Y, and Z neighborhoods specifically. So I think we'll try to make this as formative as possible to you, and I think staff would then come with a bit of a recommendation to give you a starting point. So to not just leave you with 6 buckets and say, have at it, I think will help from what we've heard along the way.
Okay. So just to clarify, sorry. So they're going to be more granular buckets than what we have currently.
Yes, yes. We'll try to make them granular without being too granular, okay?
Yeah, okay, got it. Thank you.
That sounds good, because I didn't know if there was enough time for us to then give more guiding principles to the Parks Board. I mean, this is pretty
And
fast
I think
schedule.
we'll add, in response to that, I think we'll go back to the Parks and Open Space System Plan, which has overall principles that I think guide us all in this.
That's what I was thinking, because we just adopted that, so that kind of is the guiding principles. So, and I would imagine that when this ultimately comes to council, and when council, assuming we do it, that we will be combining both broader descriptions with specific projects. Just like when we did the transportation levy, we had certain buckets for, say, ped bike, but we didn't list every single bike lane that we're going to build. Right. So there's certainly things that we want to include in there, like partial funding for an aquatic center, partial funding for Eastgate Park, open space acquisition, but we're not identifying we're going to acquire that open space. So I think it's going to be a mix, to speak to what Councilmember Barksdale was saying, when it finally comes back to us, assuming that we are in agreement to do it. So, yeah, I'm in favor of sending it to them. Thanks.
And I do think that the open space, the parks and open spaces, I think we have some guiding principles or something in there that I would hope that the Parks and Community Services Board would have in front of them as they make their recommendations.
Yes.
Okay, great. That sounds good. Any other comments?
Yeah, actually, the only comment I was going to make is that as part of the Parks and Open Space work, they do have maps, and we have been talking about the equity piece, about, you know, where are the areas where there aren't very many parks, and certainly Eastgate and Factoria, right, kind of that South Bellevue area is a space for that, you know. So I do believe that they have those tools, and perhaps when the information comes back, the presentation can include some of those tools that were presented as part of the Parks Board, so that the council has a better lens into the tools that they've been using as they've generated and updated the Parks and Open Space Plan.
Right.
Yeah, thanks. That sounds good. Thank you very much. Did you get the information that you need?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. So this is the third and final discussion item that we're seeking your direction on, and this is about park impact fees. So impact fees are standardized charges assessed to new development projects, and it's for the purpose of supporting a portion of the cost of new surrounding public infrastructure that's required to serve the growth in new residents or employees. So state law authorizes impact fees for a variety of public facilities, and this includes streets, as you know about, parks and open space, recreation facilities, school facilities, and fire protection. The City of Bellevue currently assesses a transportation impact fee for new residential and commercial development, and collects school impact fees for certain school districts in Bellevue that assess such fees to new residential development. There is no impact fee for parks in Bellevue. So steady incremental growth in the number of individuals coming to Bellevue to live and work each day creates a constant pressure on the existing finite amount of parks and open space within the current system. So parks and parks facilities are increasingly used by a greater number of individuals, resulting in an overall decrease, this is the theory, in the share of parks resources that each Bellevue resident currently enjoys. So Impact fees are calculated with the intent to quantify and then maintain a certain per capita share value of parks and open space for all Bellevue residents and workers, both existing and new. Parks impact fees are a common fee that developers working in East King County are paying in Bellevue's neighboring cities of Kirkland, Redmond, Issaquah, Sammamish, and Renton, among others in King County. Fees are assessed by formula rates on single-family and multifamily residential development, with the option of fee exemptions for affordable housing. The cities of Redmond and Issaquah assess park impact fees on commercial development, recognizing that the daytime population of workers, it's definitely a part of the community, and they also use a share of the local parks and open space system. Park impact fees as a revenue source are distinctly different than voter-approved funding mechanisms. Impact fees are not voter-approved. They're not assessed on every Bellevue property owner, but they're a one-time fee paid only on new development as it occurs. So one time only, not to everyone. And since fees are tied to the development cycle, impact fees, the revenue is relatively stable, but it fluctuates a bit from year to year, depending on the development that year. So next slide, please. So this chart shows fees in impact fees in surrounding communities. And you can see that there's a significant range in per unit impact fees for residential units and also for commercial floor area space on the east side. And let me specifically explain this chart. So as you look at, for example, the city of Redmond, for every new single family home that's added, there is a fee to that developer of just over $5,400. And then for a multifamily unit, it's just over $3,700. And then in Redmond, there's also a fee for new commercial space that's created. And the rate varies by the type of use. And so that's just an example. And let me go to the next slide. And so, to provide a little bit more information, so this is an example. So in Redmond, since 2018, the City of Redmond's park impact fee has produced revenues per year somewhere between $2 million and about $4.4 million. So that's just to give you some indication. Obviously, Redmond's a little different, but obviously it's also a community that's growing. And so that tees up really the final opportunity for questions and discussion. And I'd say, so with council direction, the next step moving forward towards considering a park impact fee would be for staff to undertake a fiscal study to quantify the range of fees that would be assessed under enabling state law. So if we were directed to move forward, and depending on the time of completing the study, we would return to council for further discussion and direction at either the upcoming kind of budget discussions this year or at the mid-biennium. So it's going to take a bit of time. And I'll say that this can be on a totally separate timeline than any discussion about a parks voter initiative. So it's totally separate timeline, but also wanted to respond to your question from the March 7th council meeting.
Thank you. Councilmember Barksdale, you want to start us off?
Thank you. So just to answer the question, I do support a park impact fee. I think it's a shared resource that everyone benefits from. I do remember even for commercial, when I was at Microsoft, some folks wanted to work in the Redmond campus just because there was more open space for them to walk around during breaks and so forth. So I think there's a shared benefit and so a shared cost. I guess, how does an impact fee, impact fee, relate to an in lieu fee in terms of how do they align or cancel each other out, or not cancel each other out, but?
I think they are a bit different, and so the development fee example would be in the Bellred sub area. There are opportunities for developers to get some additional bonuses if they provide X, Y, or Z. In some cases, they can provide those on site. In other cases, they would rather kind of pay the in lieu fee rather than do that there. So it's kind of separate from that because that is in place in Belred and downtown, and so that's happening currently. This would be more on a per unit basis or per square foot basis that would be basically charged to all new development.
Got it. So they can coexist, and there is a possibility of revenue from the impact fee and an in lieu fee.
I believe that is true, yes.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks. I support continuing to move forward with this, and I know it'll be a heavy lift to do it in time for this budget. I'd love to get it in time for this year's budget. If not, the mid-buy is fine. It takes a lot of number crunching and analysis by usually an outside consultant to come up with the initial impact fee study for something like this. So yes, I'd like to move forward. And I think that there's several reasons for that. One is we've always had in Bellevue an approach of growth helps pay for growth. This is squarely in that category. The people that are bringing, or the developers that are bringing more people into the city will help share the expansion of the park and rec system. So I think that that's very fair. It won't apply to if someone tears down their house and builds a new one, they don't have to pay an impact fee because that's not a new unit. Only if they took their single family house down and built a sixplex, for example, then they might have to pay $5 for the 5 new units. So I think it's fair. I also think to Councilmember Barksdale's comment, he was asking about fee in lieu and such. The thing about impact fees is if the developer, say we have someone developing a very large tract in Belred, if they wanted to dedicate land to park space, if they wanted to build part of a park that is on our capital budget, they get credit for the impact fees for that. So that incents them to do it. Oftentimes I do a lot of impact fee work in my day job. I've seen developers build projects that are far more expensive than the impact fees they pay. The city gets the benefit of that added extra. They get the credit for the impact fees, but they get $300,000 credit for impact fees, but they build a $500,000 value of project or dedicate land. That is a huge, huge benefit to the public. So I'm very much in favor of that. I also am in favor of looking at how we balance this with the rising costs of housing, and also how we balance it with the commercial property. I think that that's fair. As you said, people who come to the city to work often will go use the parks at lunch, after work, et cetera. And then finally, I think that it's going to be really important if the council green lights moving forward with the park impact fee study, that we do outreach to developers, and also to organizations like the Plush Committee at the Chamber, like the BDA, any other organizations that may have input on this. So that'll just be something. If it's moved forward, I'm sure you're going to come back to us with a plan and a schedule, and I would hope that outreach, robust outreach, will be part of the plan and the schedule. So thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. You know, I also agree with doing a study on the park impact fee. I agree with my colleagues that, growth has not been paying for growth, and we know that we're continuing to be a growing city with needs that are exceeding our revenues. So at the budget workshop in March, we talked about, you showed us the graphs that show that our expenses are going to outpace our revenues. So I agree with doing the study. I like the fact that some of the other cities have included a fee exemption for affordable housing. I think that is a really important piece to look at. And that from a high quality of life standpoint, our parks and open space is a huge part of that, and why, as Councilmember Barksdale said, why people choose to work here and why businesses choose to have people here. I agree with Councilmember Robertson about doing outreach. I guess my question is this: when you're doing this study, I'd like for us to really look more broadly at the revenue and expense gap so that we're looking more holistically at where our budget is and where the shortfalls are, because I feel like this is one piece of the whole solution. But I think that if we only look at the pieces, we may not see the whole puzzle. And I think it would be important for the council to have a more holistic view about the budget and how we align our budget and how this fits in with a portion of that. And there may be other revenue discussions we need to have. And I'd like to understand how that fits in with this, because this isn't in a vacuum, is my point. So I'm not sure exactly how to word that. I guess for tonight, we're still voting on whether we're going to proceed with the study of just the park impact fee. But I would like to figure out how you come back and talk more holistically about our budget and how we align.
Councilmember Zahn, I think that I can look at the city manager's office and come up with a plan to bring that back as a more holistic look. I certainly understand it. It makes tremendous sense because it's hard to make decisions in a vacuum. And so I certainly understand the need. I'll think of a path to bring that back, and I'll work with the city manager's office on that.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I'm going to be the odd man out on this because I'm interested in studying it. I'm not at this point interested in putting more fees on residences in Bellevue, but I would be very interested in commercial development. And also, I'm more interested in doing an arts impact fee. You know, our arts budget is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. A very small arts impact fee would be transformative for our city. So if we do an impact fee study, can we also include how it could affect the arts if we were to either include that or do that instead? I know that's not your department, but.
I can jump in there if you'd like me to. So we can certainly look at it. I don't know if arts fits under the state law requirements. I think we'd have to talk to the city attorney's office about that.
Okay.
But certainly, if it is doable, we can certainly look into it.
Great, I'd appreciate that. So did you get all the information you need from us on this?
I believe that completes our presentation for this evening.
Okay, great, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time this evening.
Are you okay to continue on, everybody? Okay, let's go. Mr. Miyake, you want to introduce the next topic, please?
The last item on your study session agenda this evening is an informational update and look ahead on the city's Vision Zero program. This is an area of keen interest to the council. Joining us this evening is Angie Singalakis, Director, Paula Stevens, Assistant Director, and Franz Lowenhertz, Planning Manager, all from the Transportation Department. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the team to begin the presentation.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, City Manager Miyake, Mayor Robinson, and members of the council. I'm very pleased to share with you tonight the progress that we've been making with Vision Zero. I want to start by saying that safety is the top priority for the Transportation Department, and it's embedded in everything that we do and all of our standards, maintenance standards as well. And Vision Zero represents what we are doing that is above and beyond what most are, and calling attention to it, and with the goal of achieving zero serious injuries and fatalities by 2023. And in order to elevate the importance of this data-driven process, we ended up utilizing a leadership team, steering committee, consisting of most of the department heads in the city. And our program has gained national attention, as you'll hear about soon. This is a council priority, and it does advance our goals with equity, sustainability, and technology. This is for information only, and no action or direction is sought by the council at this time. So next slide.
It's not advancing.
There you go.
All right. Okay, and our presentation begins with Paula Stevens. She's the Assistant Director for Transportation Planning, and provide some background information. And then Franz Lowenhertz, Mobility Planning and Solutions Manager, will summarize what we've done for Vision Zero in 2021 and 2022.
Okay, can you hear me all right? Okay, super. So I first want to begin by thanking you for hosting, uh-oh, don't touch the electronics. One moment, please. I'm going to be in trouble with IT. Okay. First, I want to start by thanking you for hosting this briefing tonight, Mayor Robertson and council members, and for your continued leadership around Vision Zero. I think as you recall, the purpose of Vision Zero is the elimination of traffic deaths and serious injury collisions on Bellevue streets by 2030. So to achieve this target, the Transportation Commission recommended, and you adopted in 2020, a safe systems approach to help us focus on safe people, safe streets, safe speeds, and safe vehicles, as well as supporting elements, very important, supporting elements and underlying focus on leadership, on culture, on partnerships, and on data. So the Safe Systems approach is founded on the belief that deaths and serious injuries on our city streets are preventable, and that they are not accidents. We know that people will make mistakes and that crashes will occur, but the aim of Vision Zero is to ensure that crashes do not result in serious injuries or fatalities. So following your approval of the Safe Systems approach and associated strategies, staff members finalized the Vision Zero strategic plan in December 2020. And then to keep our efforts going and to monitor and track our progress, to be responsible for our financial resources and to be accountable to the public and to council, a cross-departmental staff team develops an annual action plan that's signed off on by our leadership team. And work on the 2022 action plan is well underway, and it will be described in further detail by Franz Lowenhurst. So next slide, please. So, but before we describe for you what we've accomplished and what we have and planned for 2022, it's important to us to recognize the cross-departmental team that you have entrusted with the day-to-day implementation of Vision Zero. So as you see on the slide and on your screen, reflect on the left-hand side of the slide is the Vision Zero Charter that identifies the roles and responsibilities of the Vision Zero steering team, which is comprised of department directors and the city manager's office, subject matter experts from throughout the city of Bellevue, and the transportation department's core team, and our project manager, Franz Lowenhurst, and myself. So with that, I am now going to turn it over to Franz, who is going to spend the rest of the time, the remainder of our presentation, updating you on the work of this One City group, telling you what we accomplished in 2021 and what we plan to do in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, council members. It's great to be here with you this evening and sharing with you this update on Vision Zero. On this slide, we have some representative safe systems actions that we implemented this past year. And we'll move from the top left to the right, starting with safe streets. And I'm pleased to share with you this past year, under the oversight of staff, 9.85 miles of pedestrian and bicycle facilities were implemented in our community. In the safe speeds category, based on a community survey, the speed limit reduction to 20 miles per hour was the most popular intervention along the East Bellevue Demonstration Greenway project. In the safe people category, we ended up using our social media channels at the City of Bellevue to boost safety messages shared with us by national and state partners. And in the safe vehicle category, the Bellevue Police Department began using unmanned aerial system technologies to better understand the forensics of crash events. Now moving down to some of the supportive elements, the lower left quadrant, starting with data. This past year, we updated our Vision Zero story map. One of those notable refinements to that was inclusion of a dynamic dashboard that allows the public to drill down deeper into the data and then cross-reference that information with other related data sets, including equity indicators. Leadership, this past year, we were successful in securing $150,000 in grant funds from the Washington Transportation Safety Commission. And we're using those funds now through 2023 to conduct 6 road safety assessments in partnership with the Bellevue School District, approximate to 12 schools. Culture is a big part of our work at Bellevue is coordinating with the broader Vision Zero community. We are active participants with the National League of Cities and many other organizations sharing industry best practices. And an example of that is our sharing of our video analytics conflict data with the Institute of Transportation Engineers this past year in support of their sandbox competition. And the intent behind that was really to help the industry more broadly engage in these proactive data sets, moving beyond what is traditionally a reactive model, waiting for people to become crash statistics. So we're seeing significant interest nationally in the work that we're doing here at the City of Bellevue in that respect, which relates directly to a partnership we concluded this past year, working in collaboration with Microsoft, Advanced Mobility Analytics Group, and Jacobs Engineering. We looked at the efficacy of leading pedestrian intervals, LPIs. And LPIs, stated simply, gives pedestrians a head start, typically about 5 seconds, so that they get established in the crosswalk and become visible to people driving. And we undertook a before-after evaluation at 20 intersections in crossroads downtown, and we observed in partnership with these various technology companies a 42% reduction in conflicts between people driving and pedestrians, a very low-cost intervention that is now informing work that I'll speak to shortly that we have underway in 22. But before I do that, I wanted to share with you what the nation is saying about Bellevue. We received 3 awards for our road safety work this past year. One of those being a National Roadway Safety Award from Federal Highway Administration and Roadway Safety Foundation. Another one from the Safety Council at Institute of Transportation Engineers. And finally, a national transportation system management Operations Award from the National Operations Center of Excellence. So before we move on to what we're doing this year, it's important to pause for a moment and consider some of the statistics for Bellevue. Although Bellevue fatal serious injury collisions reflected in an orange line on this chart when normalized for population are below the top 5 Washington cities in blue and the Washington state statistics in black, clearly more work is required. And this past year, in preliminary statistics for 21, we observed 26 serious injuries and 1 fatality on our streets. That compares to the prior year data of 12 serious injuries and 4 fatalities. And this uptick that we're seeing in fatal serious injury collisions are observed also at the national level, which is why the U.S. Department of Transportation has dedicated new resources, $5 billion over the next 5 years in the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program associated with the bipartisan infrastructure law to help communities move towards Vision Zero and to address what Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg identifies as a national crisis. Which brings us to what we're doing this year. So as Paula mentioned, our leadership team, Andrew being a member and many others on the leadership team, concluded their work on approving the 22 Vision Zero Action Plan, starting again in the upper left quadrant with Safe Streets. One of the efforts we have programmed to get underway later this year is working with stakeholders in the urban core, that's downtown Bellred and Wilburton, engaging with them in determining what kind of bicycle project improvements we can bring online rapidly to address network gaps and to create access improvements to light rail stations and to East Trail. So that work is getting underway later in September with the Transportation Commission and with the broader community. In Safe Speeds, March 28, you all, City Council, approved our moving forward with a slow zone program on streets proximate to Tyee Middle School. that work will continue. Another notable Safe Speeds action that we were awarded this past month is consultant technical support from Federal Highway Administration to develop our speed management plan, and that body of work will commence early next month. Safe People, I made reference to our LPI study, the Leading Pedestrian Interval Study, this past year. Last week, 1 week ago rather, we began rolling out the first wave of deployment of LPI more broadly in our downtown, the first of 3 waves. And as part of that first wave, we wanted to make sure the public was better aware of what this signal operation change is all about. So we posted signs at on those signal poles, and with a QR code, people are able to get additional information on what that is. Safe Vehicles, we are actively involved with a number of agency partners advancing the Bellevue College Connection, reflected in this image, but also over 12 dozen additional transit projects are underway that are intended to offer equitable and safe mobility options for Bellevue residents. Moving down to the lower left, data. One of our undertakings this year is developing a count strategy report. We have a number of these permanent count systems that are generating data about people walking and biking in Bellevue. We want to get very clear on how to use that data to inform our decision making about a wide range of topics, including where to make improvements for people walking and biking. Leadership, we will continue to pursue existing grant funding opportunities, notably through the Highway Safety Improvement Program, but also I made reference to the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program. Culture, continuing to develop our understanding among staff about the safe system approach is a priority, and we're always looking for opportunities. Reflected in this image under culture is an engagement we had here at Bellevue City Hall on March 10. We were fortunate to benefit from Arizona State University's Cloud Innovation Center. They brought together Bellevue staff and other agency partners to design, think creative, safe system solutions to address vulnerable road user concerns. Finally, in partnerships, 1 week ago today, we also commenced our new partnership with Amazon Web Services, Ouster, Outsight, Sighthound, Advanced Mobility Analytics Group, and Fair and Peers. And with that undertaking, we deployed both LiDAR camera and 4K camera edge compute platforms. Edge compute basically means this technology is generating insights at the location where it is mounted. So we're going to be generating new safety metrics from that and informing improvements going into the future. So these are some really advanced uses of technology. This is the last slide I wanted to share with you. It's reflective of recent interaction I had advancing our road safety assessment work in partnership with the Bellevue School District. Susan Thomas, principal at Highland Middle School, graciously connected us with the parents of Ethan Lee, who is a 13-year-old who rides his bicycle year-round, rain or shine, to school. And Ethan wanted me to share this perspective, his vision for Bellevue, which is reflected on this slide, that he would like to ensure that people who ride bicycles and people who walk in our community feel safer doing so. And for us as staff, we are really are humbled and inspired by these kinds of communications we receive from the community on a daily basis. They reaffirm the importance of our work and remind us of the critical importance of ensuring that everyone gets home safe each night. So that concludes our presentation for this evening.
Thank you. Councilmember Robertson, you are the liaison for.
Oh, it was not.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
That's right, it's Councilmember Zahn.
But she can go first.
Okay, that's fine. I have a lot of, and actually, I thank you for the presentation. I wanted to give an update to my colleagues and I guess the public about what I've been doing regionally on Vision Zero. Because as many of you know, I'm on the Transportation Policy Board, among other regional transportation-focused assignments. And we just finished a big body of work, but the work's not done yet. So every 4 years, the Puget Sound Regional Council updates the Regional Transportation Plan, and that provides the region's long-range transportation plan under both federal and state law. And there's a hard deadline for this plan in May, and so our work had to be very intense for a short period of time to get it done. So this plan builds from Vision 2050 with key policy focus areas identified by the Transportation Policy Board members for the plan update, including access to transit, project evaluation, equity, climate, local agency needs, and safety. I also was on the project selection task force work last year, which also talked a lot about some of these important values in how to score projects for grant funding. At the TPB, I've been working for nearly 2 years to ensure that the safety is more centrally focused in the plan. I did that at the Project Selection Task Force, and I did that at the Transportation Policy Board because I know how important Vision Zero and safety is to the people of Bellevue and to this city council. Last week, the board members took action to place more emphasis on improving safety and achieving the goal of 0 deaths and serious injuries. It was actually had to be a voted amendment that was more controversial than you would have thought, but we did get it through with policy language added about goal timelines and how PSRC will use a safe systems approach and use safety as part of the work plan evaluation work. The key Bellevue amendment was to develop the regional safety work plan, convene regional partners, establish a progress report to track performance, and consider resources for safety projects and programs. And the amendments that got through the Puget Sound Regional Council, TPB, were modeled on the work that City of Bellevue has developed. The next stop for the regional transportation plan is at the executive board, which Mayor Robinson serves on, and then to the General Assembly, which Mayor Robinson is our representative on that. One of the things that helped get this these amendments through was the federal push that Mr. Lowenhertz referenced about the additional federal money for safety projects. So I think that helped get it over the line. I hope it stays in at the next 2 voting levels, but I just wanted to let my colleagues here and the public know that I've continued to work with transportation staff to make sure that we push this not just in Bellevue, but on the regional level, and I think it's going to make a difference. We've seen, you showed that chart at the beginning, every city that was around the table the last couple years at the Transportation Policy Board and Project Selection Task Force has talked about the increased injuries and deaths. It's just happening everywhere, not just in Washington, but nationwide, and it's getting worse, so we need to work harder to make it get better. So really appreciate the work. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Zahn.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I'm so proud of us. I'm so proud of you. The words that come to mind is heroes for zero. I think some of you have heard me talk about it because in Europe, that's like a tagline that's been around for a while. And I want to say that I think there's a complement of interest and dedication to safety and safe streets. So as Councilmember Robertson talked about what she's doing locally and regionally in our area, I think that we are well known within our local area, but also at the national level. So I think that, you know, some of that work that we're doing from years ago, the council, when I was on the Transportation Commission and the council voted on adopting a safe systems approach with staff, right, support and leadership and culture. So when you were showing that slide, I actually think that culture is first, right? A culture that says that every one of us should be safe on our streets, and then the leadership, and then the partnerships and those principles that talk about the safe system approach. And I think that every one of you are exhibiting that caring for our community to make sure that everyone goes home safe. And it's huge. You know, we are seen as a leader, not just with the awards that we received, but I can tell you that the fact that in January, when we still had the Omicron going on, that there were 35, 40 people in DC attending one of our Vision Zero summits, and that the chair of the National Transportation Safety Board couldn't come in person, but she got on a Zoom and gave us like a 10, 15-minute introduction that really highlights how much she sees that Bellevue is leading the way in this work is huge. You know, what we've seen is that as we position ourselves to get access to the Safe Streets and Road for All program, I believe that we are in a very good position to lead the way to get more federal grant funding for Bellevue, to model and pilot more of projects like the leading pedestrian intervals project, the video analytics, all the different things that we are uniquely positioned to be able to do in partnership with our school district, leverage technology. The other one I just wanted to mention is that we're being asked to provide presentations. So at the National League of Cities, we provided a presentation on the Transportation Infrastructure Services Committee to the first-tier suburbs, where many cities learned about what we were doing. We're being asked this week to be part of the K4C on mobility. Safety is a climate and public health policy. So they want to know what we're doing, because in our region, we're leading the way. And so I am very proud of the work that we're doing, and I'm excited for the work ahead. Here would be my ask is, I know that when we were squeezed on the budget, we had to figure out how to pinch our pennies to move the Vision Zero to have budget starting in 2020 or 2021. So I guess my question to you as you are working on this is, what is the budget ask as we go into our biennial budget? And although we believe that we are well positioned to get some of the federal grant funding, I want to make sure that we're making that commitment also with our pocketbook about what are the kind of things we can move faster on, because as people come back, I think Councilmember Robertson talked about the fact that people are driving faster. They're distracted. We have mental health crisis coming out of COVID. So how do we make sure that we actually are committing to the kind of dollars we need to move faster? So thank you.
See if they have any comment on council members?
We haven't submitted our budget yet to the city manager's office, but if you recall, last year we did have an item in the CIP that is specifically to match grant funding. So we're ahead with that. It's like an opportunity fund, if you will, and we'll have to see where that goes coming into the next budget.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Barksdale.
Thank you, Mayor. Echo the sentiments in terms of the work that you're doing. I appreciate the focus on advanced technology. It's something that's a passion of mine, obviously, and the work that's happening in the region by Councilmember Robertson and also on the commission. So thank you, Councilmember Zahn, too. Just a couple questions. That decrease in the chart that everybody's referenced so far, I was curious about the increase, what's contributing to the increase, but also because it's not a smooth increase, it's very jagged, especially around 2016, 2019, and then 2021. So I guess maybe a series of fits and starts of something. I was just really curious about what that's about. And then I appreciate the work that we're doing in terms of, like improving the bike ped safety, and taking the technological approach to understanding what's going on. By the way, really love the story map. I've been digging into it. Are we also connecting with them with bike cyclists and pedestrians on a personal level to understand sort of their on-the-ground experience in addition to, and sort of looking at both of those types of data? We are, okay.
Yep. Do you want to take that, Franz?
Sure. So, so the data I shared, as I caveated, for 21, it is preliminary.
Yeah.
So, but I think you all have observed anecdotally what is very likely among the contributing factors, and certainly speeding. Every indication is that played an increasing role. Failure to yield to pedestrians, driving under the influence, these are all common distraction. These are all commonly identified top contributing factors. We haven't had the chance to drill down into all of these indicators, but those very likely continue to be the case. It often takes a long time to really move the needle. It'd be great to see this occur instantly, but it is achievable. There are cities that have gone through the safe system approach, that have reversed the tide, and you have to start with that leadership, the vision, and the follow through. And so I think we'll continue to monitor. We'll certainly share additional details after the final data is cemented by the state. That's the source that we look to finalize the data. Did I answer your question on that one?
I guess it's more of like the more pronounced jumps and decreases compared to the state and the top 5 cities, even pre-pandemic, right? And then I'm surprised also maybe during in 2019. I was just curious if we had any sort of insight about what was happening there.
Yeah, the most recent uptick, I think, is what was observed, that there were fewer people on the road, and psychologically that prompted a lot of people to speed more so than they did in the past. I think that uptick, though, was observed across the board as well in the top 5 Washington cities and the state as a whole and nationally. There's significant jagged line work there.
For 2020 to 2021 there is. For 2018 to 2019, and then it drops 2019 to 2020. It's fine. I can follow up offline.
Sure, yeah. Sure. On the second point related to moving beyond the data points that we've been talking about and connecting with people, that's precisely why I thought it important to bring us back to the human side of the story and share with you what the multiple conversations I had with the parents of Ethan Lee, but also the conversations we have with people on walking audits, with the daily communications that we receive as staff. At the end of the day, the data doesn't fully convey the people behind the information, so I think staff is in wholehearted agreement. We need to do more, and indeed, on our road safety assessment work, I was listening to the earlier NEP discussion about reaching out. So Mayor Robinson probably will be happy to hear we did outreach to Silver Glen Community Center, a Zoom call with them. We're actively reaching out to affordable housing units approximate to the road safety assessment corridors we're doing, and soon we'll be posting signs on those corridors. It's really, as someone who's been doing this kind of work a long time, it's really hard to reach the people who need to be reached most, and so we do prioritize this. We go above and beyond. We use the languages. We get out there and pound the pavement to the extent, humanly possible, and we do care.
Yeah, I think it would be really cool to also have some summary of that or something in the data dashboard, just so we have a balance of not just the quant, but also the quant.
So I think it was it 2016 when we first won the Video Analytics Award, and I got to sit next to you on the plane and learn what it was all about. And it just, there was so much attention to it when you presented in DC from other cities. And now, you know, how many years later, there's still so much interest in what you're doing, and what you're doing continues to evolve. So that is an amazing accomplishment. That's a great project, and it's so innovative. I'm really proud of you and the city for initiating that. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it continues to help us keep people safe before an accident happens. So thank you very much for all the work, and I don't think we have, Councilmember Zahn has one more comment, question.
You spoke about the Tyee project, and I think that, you know, connecting with the youth is going to be so important, because I still remember being at Overlake when we had the Vision Zero Summit, and, you know, talking about when teens are learning how to drive, they can be the best instructors for their parents and grandparents about safe driving. But the reason I bring up Tyee is that, Andrew, you and I spoke about this a little bit. It was on consent, so we didn't talk about it on the council. But I did think about the fact that the 20 miles an hour only right around the schools, and then we have these changing speed limits. I do wonder whether we can educate the community to the point where the 20 miles an hour should be throughout that neighborhood, and not just in those couple of streets, and then we go to 25 and 30 and 35. It seems like that would be confusing, and you're not gaining all that much time by driving, you know, 30 miles an hour versus 20 miles. And so as we move forward, I'd like to think we can get to a place where our community can embrace the slower speed limits in our neighborhood areas, especially around schools, but not just schools, right? Just in our neighborhoods in general, so that we can all be safer. So that I wasn't sure I was completely on board with the staggered, you know, graduated approach. So just a comment. I don't know if you want to respond to that, but it was something noticeable to me.
It appeared that the reason for it was a different street classifications, but I think that your point is really well taken, and expanding that beyond just certain schools is definitely a goal that we have as a department.
I'll just add that we are now in the late stages of wrapping up our speed limit SOP, which will help inform our next body of work, which is the speed management plan work that I mentioned that'll commence. We're having our kickoff meeting with the consultant team that Federal Highway Administration is directing to work with us May 2nd. So I think there is a significant interest in looking beyond this more, I think you're kind of saying piecemeal approach. How do we look at it holistically in districts? And I think that'll certainly be part of that planning work that gets underway very shortly.
Great, thank you.
All right, and with that, our meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.